feeling that everything's completely fucked up.
So here we are once again. I am Hank Pattison, and this is The Life of the Mind. It is 1 o'clock p.m. on Monday, October 19th, 2015. There is a Canadian federal election going on right now. I already went out and voted this morning, so I am feeling very smug and full of myself as I sit here with my black cup of coffee and my fruit smoothie. Have a sip of my coffee, let you enjoy that. Oh, you can just taste it through those digital airwaves, can't you? Yeah, sure you can. So I got some notes here about what I'm supposed to podcast about today. I have a crumpled up piece of paper that was sitting in my back pocket, and on it, in tiny little pencil letters, it says podcast, and after that, it says Moleman. What does that mean? What am I? Am I a crazy person? Am I just writing down abstract things and stuffing them in my pocket so I can remind myself of them later? No. So I was thinking about the Fantastic Four. Because somebody should care about them. I I don't care about the Fantastic Four, but I still think about them because I work in a comic book store. So, sort of in the same way I don't care about some stranger, but if they're stopped in traffic in front of me, then I am aware of them and I am thinking about them. The Fantastic Four are, well, they're not strangers. I've known them my whole life. I grew up with them to a certain degree. I was never really fond of them. I know there was a good few years where I was reading Fantastic Four comics. The first Fantastic Four comic I ever bought was the one where it was revealed that, how does this go? The Human Torch's wife, who was the Thing's ex-girlfriend, and that in and of itself is kind of fucked up, but forget that. Anyways, it turns out she was a Skrull. But then it was revealed that she was a good Skrull. And I can't imagine that you're listening to this thinking, what the fuck's a Skrull? But Skrulls are shape-shifting aliens who battle the Fantastic Four. Theoretically, they were supposed to be the aliens in Avengers, in the first Avengers movie, except Fox owns the rights to the Fantastic Four, and that includes the Skrulls. When you buy the rights to the Fantastic Four, you get their enemies. Which means you get a lot of great characters. You get the Silver Surfer, you get Galactus, you get Doctor Doom, arguably Marvel Universe's greatest villain. I don't know if I agree with that. I just know that he is often listed as being considered one of Marvel's greatest villains. Who would I say is Marvel's greatest villain? That's a really good question. Off the top of my head, I am prone to say Magneto, just because I think he's a much more complex character. I think you could do some really cool stuff with Doctor Doom. I am so off track already. What could you do with Doctor Doom that would be interesting? Well, okay, here's the deal with Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is Iron Man, except Iron Man and Tony Stark both need their suits to live, but Iron Man and Tony Stark, my God. Doctor Doom and Iron Man. The only difference is that Doctor Doom can't take his suit of armor off. He lives in it forever. You have to assume that thing smells terrible. But maybe he has little air freshener vents on it or something. I don't know. So yeah, imagine Iron Man. Playboy billionaire, like a really good looking guy who gets really screwed up in an accident, puts on a suit of armor for the rest of his life. He has magical powers, and he's the ruler of a small Eastern European country. Like, what is not interesting about that? What is not awesome about that? Essentially, it's like, man, I don't even know what it's like. I don't know enough social history to make a good comparison here. I want to say it's like if Iron Man, Osama bin Laden, and Hitler were all the same guy. But that's not even right. Like, there's some Dracula in there because, like, he lives in a castle and is the king and the monarch of his country. Anyways, Doctor Doom's pretty cool. I guess he's all right. But the Fantastic Four's first enemy, the very first villain they ever faced in the first issue of Fantastic Four, #1, was the Moleman. That's who I have written down on this piece of paper. Why did I write down Moleman? Because I was thinking about the Moleman. If you're not a comic person, maybe you won't reflect on this quite the same way. But if you do read comics and you know the Fantastic Four, I don't know if you ever really thought about this, but like, okay, what are the powers of the Fantastic Four? You got Reed Richards, who has infinite malleability. You got Susan Storm, who can turn invisible and create invisible force shields. Human Torch, Johnny Storm, who can fly around and shoot things with fireballs. And the Thing, who is almost... he's not Hulk level strong. He's often not even considered to be one of the strongest guys in the Marvel Universe, but he's got that hard outer shell. And I always imagine that, like, being punched by the Thing is like getting hit by 3 of Thor's hammer all at once. Like, he's dense and rocky, and like when him and the Hulk are fighting, I'm always imagining like the Hulk skinning his knuckles and breaking his fingers, just punching the Thing so hard. And the Thing can really take a punch. Anyway, so their first enemy was the Moleman. What are the Moleman's powers? Well, interestingly, the Moleman has no powers. He is a short, little, slightly chubby man who can't see very well. That's it. I'm done. That's what I mean. Ooh, he has an underground kingdom and he can make monsters do stuff that he wants sometimes. I mean, it's almost like if I went off to the woods and became whatever the northern Canadian version of the Moleman is, and like when people fucked with me, I would just like rally a bunch of moose and drive those moose through their country or through their city or whatever, and it would destroy a bunch of stuff. Like, I still don't have any powers. I'm just pushing things around. It's cool that I can herd giant animals, but like when I suddenly realized that the first guy the Fantastic Four fought was a powerless little fat man with no friends who can't see very well, I was like, well, realistically, anybody should be able to beat that guy. Like, he's basically like Mr. Magoo, which is a very scathing point. If you're 500 years old, the rest of you are probably like, Mr. Magoo? Mr. Magoo is he was a offensively blind cartoon character back in the day. The day being like, I don't know, the 1950s or something. I think they made a live-action movie with Leslie Nielsen, who was in the Naked Gun series. So with O.J. Simpson, who you might remember from, I don't know, what's O.J. Simpson famous for? Didn't he wear dungaree, blue jeans, and snazzy cowboy boots or something? Anywho, my point is, what's the deal with the Moleman? Like, why did somebody say, here is a great character? He has no powers. He is physically impaired. He's almost like if Daredevil wasn't totally blind, he could still kind of see. He had no other senses, and he was kind of chubby. So if Foggy Nelson, Daredevil's sidekick, couldn't see, he would still have an advantage over the Moleman. He is still a more physical character. I mean, you could probably break one of my arms and legs and then throw me into a pit while I'm still in a huge amount of pain, and I could still probably beat the Moleman in a one-on-one battle. He's not a crafty... Well, maybe he is a crafty dude, and that's what he does, but he is not a physical combatant. When he goes up against the Fantastic Four, he's like, I'm going to send my monsters after you, and then they battle giant monsters, crap like that. And you're like, oh, what a great comic this was 500 years ago. But what's my point? I'm not trying to arrive at a point here. I just wanted to say the Moleman is freaking ridiculous. And he probably, I don't know, I want to say he probably shouldn't be in the movies. Here's the deal. Here's my deal. If you're making a Fantastic Four movie and there is not a throwaway scene of the Fantastic Four kicking the living crap out of something the size of Godzilla, then you don't know how to make a Fantastic Four movie. because kicking the crap out of things the size of Godzilla is basically the number one thing on the Fantastic Four's list of things we do. And it's weird. It's never come up in any of the movies before. They've done technically 4 Fantastic Four live action movies, and not once have they ever battled a giant monster. You look at the cover of Fantastic Four #1, giant monster. It's pretty awesome. But that's not the case. That's for some reason nobody wanted to put forth the budget to have the Fantastic Four battle Godzilla or something else like it. By the way, if you just want to do a Fantastic Four versus Godzilla, damn, I think that would be pretty awesome. But it's really hard to say if we're going to get another Fantastic Four movie anytime soon. I watched with grim anticipation. Is that a word? Anticipation? How the last one went down, and the one that Josh Trank just directed. Josh Trank was the guy who did Chronicle, which is possibly my all-time favorite superhero, superpower-based movie. I do kind of wish that Chronicle wasn't a found footage film, as I kind of think those are super stupid, and it wasn't necessary. I think you could tell the story that was Chronicle without it being found footage, and you would have a stronger motion picture in the end. But it's still a great movie, and I'm being critical for no reason. There's a part of me that would be fascinated to see the Fantastic Four done more found footage style. I would love to see a full 2-hour faux documentary on the Fantastic Four. I think that would be awesome. Like, you're saying, yeah, so apparently this dude who's really smart built a rocket ship. Him and his friends flew into outer space with it, and they got nuked by cosmic radiation, and they came back with weird cellular deformities that allow them to do some pretty cool stuff. And then you have a skeptical news crew doing a documentary, just following them around and learning what they do. I'm on board, man. Like, I just sold myself on this pitch. I want to see this movie now. Though I feel like there's also another level of, if a bunch of people illegally went out into outer space, got nuked with radiation, came back, and were superpowered, I think there'd be a lot more people going out into outer space. Like, I think the government would just be like, well, let's send 30 dudes up there and then get 30 super soldiers back. I think you would have to sort of embrace the idea that, I like the idea that the Fantastic Four are, what's the PC term? Handy-capable. I like the idea that the Fantastic Four are all technically handicapped. But you have to really play that up. You can't just have Johnny Storm being a super cool guy. I love the idea. Say you've got Johnny Storm, ladies man, like a really hey, a sexy young dude, world famous, I don't know, whatever the hell he is. But say he's a little insecure about, or he doesn't know how well he can control his powers. Something they lean away from in the Fantastic Four is that fire is terrifying. It only takes a very small amount of fire to deform a human being for the rest of their life. Man, when I was little, I knew a couple of kids who had been in a house fire when they were like 2 or 3, and they were physically deformed for the rest of their lives. Their features were all sort of muted and melted, and like even as teenagers, like they were going to be deformed by flame for the rest of their lives. I would love to embrace that with the Human Torch. I would love to have a dude who's like, yeah, when I'm fighting monsters and when I'm flying up in the stratosphere, I'm awesome. I'm having a great time. But I can't touch anybody because I'm scared I might burn them. I can't be close to anybody. I can't have sex. This girl wants to kiss me. I can't kiss her. Like, how about when he gets slightly excited, he does start to combust. So it becomes this thing of like, yeah, he's the most desirable playboy on the face of the planet, and yet he has to be entirely celibate. You almost have a like the X-Men's Rogue character. Rogue's mutant power. Rogue is an X-Men with the mutant power that she can absorb people's powers and memories if she comes into skin-to-skin contact with them, and she has no control over that. It's as much a disease or a sickness or a curse as it is a blessing. And I think that that's what you have to do with the Human Torch and the Fantastic Four at large. You can't just have them be super cool dudes with super cool powers. I think you have to embrace the idea that it would be terrifying. Like, even if the Human Torch stopped being scared of being on fire himself, again, like, every time, if the Human Torch is in your apartment, if he turned into the Human Torch, everything you own is destroyed. Like, you can't dick around with that. You can't have it of the, like, oh, I'm on fire, but I caught this girl who was flying from a building. Like, no, now this girl who's falling from a building, she would have just died if she'd fallen. Now she is critically burned over 80% of her life, and she's probably going to be half comatose lying in a hospital bed. Like, you should have just let her fall. I think that would be cool. I'm really thinking a lot about the Fantastic Four today. I don't know what's up with that. Haven't read anything on the Fantastic Four recently. Whenever I think about the Fantastic Four, I generally think about their appearance in The Astonishing X-Men, written by Joss Whedon and drawn by John Cassaday, I want to say. I think the reason I think about that is because John Cassaday is a phenomenal artist, and when he draws the Fantastic Four, they look like what I think they should look like. I also think the artist Jay Lee does a really good job because he makes them look terrifying. Reed Richards should scare the shit out of you. Like, it shouldn't be one of those of like, boing, cartoony. It should be like, oh, I'm going to puke. Like, I don't understand what's going on. Like, that dude can reach and he can deform his body. Like, it's like the Elephant Man is a superhero. I think that would be my pitch for the Fantastic Four is 4 people get shot out into space. They all get turned into the Elephant Man. They all come back and have to learn how to become superheroes. That's my Fantastic Four. Like, the only one who isn't critically, horribly physically deformed by what she went through is Sue Storm, and her ability is that she can be seen even less. So, like, yeah, the one of you who doesn't look like a gross, scary freak is invisible. So, basically, you're 3 freaks and the rumor of another person. Originally, when Stan Lee was pitching the idea for the Fantastic Four, Susan Storm wasn't going to be able to turn herself visible. She was going to be an invisible person all the time, and she would have to wear makeup and clothing to be seen, and then she would strip down, I guess, naked to do superhero stuff. There was a specific note in Stan Lee's pitch saying, I hope this isn't too sexy for you to draw. Hey, Stan, that would have been too sexy to draw. That would still be too sexy to draw. I don't think you can get away with having a Marvel comic where one of the lead female characters, the only female character in the book basically, was running around, was stripping down naked so she couldn't be seen. It's a weird power anyways. It's not a great power for fighting monsters. It's kind of a better... A friend of mine had a pitch, which was Susan Storm, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this idea that Susan Storm would make a really badass secret agent because she can turn invisible and she knows everybody. She's really good friends with the ruler of Atlantis, or like he really wants to bone her, that's Namor, and she knows most of the superheroes. And she's beat the Hulk at least once or twice. I know it's been pointed out that since she can create little force fields, there's this weird level. Once again, I'm going to sidetrack myself a bit here. If you have a tiny... I wish I could remember. It might have been Stephen King and Firestarter. Somebody else put this idea in my head. That, like, if you're telekinetic, but you can only lift a tiny weight. Like, let's say you can lift things with your mind, but you can only lift something that weighs about as much as a quarter. You can maybe lift about 3 grams. It's a tiny bit of influence. However, you use that inside somebody's head, and you can kill them instantaneously. You could just, like, I don't know, sever their brain to spinal column connection or things like that. Susan Storm has the same thing. She can create force fields. So, like, there's a point when Dr. Doom is blowing shit up and killing all these people, and she's got a force field to protect herself. She could just put a force field inside his brain and explode it instantaneously. She has the ability to project a physical object inside of another physical object. Like, if Susan Storm wanted to just walk around killing people, she could just walk around killing people. And if Susan Storm wanted to end the fight with Doctor Doom, I mean, she could technically do the same thing. Like, if he was shooting a blast with his hand, she could put a field in the middle of his forearm, severing his hand and his ability to control it. And that gets into all that stuff. Like, I don't care if it's adamantium or vibranium. I don't care, like, how strong of a metal it is. Like, this is getting into a weird molecular, like, no, she would separate this thing. She's not even cutting it. A lot of people talk about the idea that Susan Storm is a super powerful character, but I mean, often I find people mistake bad writing for powerful characters. Superman really has a problem with that. People who are not super familiar with comics will always say shit like, "Oh, he's too powerful," or blah 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 blah. And like, you're clearly not a comic book person. If you're a comic book person, you would know there are a billion other characters who he can trade punches with who are just as strong as he is. And as well, like, if you're sort of a more technical, like if you're a Scott McCloud fan, then you understand that, like, Superman is a fictional character, so he has fictional weaknesses. Like, his weaknesses are whatever a clever writer can come up with. And a clever writer can come up with some really clever shit. A non-clever writer, a dullard of a prose creator, he cannot. And I'll admit, a lot of Superman comics are pretty badly written. The amount of bad Superman comics to good Superman comics, I mean, what's the ratio? Like 8,000 to 1? For every 8,000 shitty Superman stories, you might get one where you're like, hey, was this written by Alan Moore or Grant Morrison? This is amazing. It's probably even in a higher ratio than that, because there are thousands of Superman stories out there. And the majority of them are not very good, as has been pointed out by many people. The dude's got his fans. I think it is very telling when people talk about how great Superman is. They'll often talk about the idea that he is the most famous superhero in the world. I don't know if this is a little distasteful of me to point out, but I think it's very telling that Superman is super popular with people who don't speak English, because the simplicity of what he is transcends language. So a more complicated character, like, I don't know, I always go back to Red Tornado for some reason. I love Red Tornado. He's a robot who is a tornado, or creates tornadoes, and also he's red, so he calls himself Red Tornado. He can fucking call himself anything. He can call himself Red Robot. He can call himself BI-749. He can call himself Sam the Jerk. It doesn't matter. But anyways, he's called Red Tornado because I guess somebody was like, hey, that's a red tornado, and it's a robot. We want to call him Red Tornado? I was like, let's just call him Red Tornado. What the hell was my point? Why was I talking about Red Tornado? I was talking about characters, was talking about vulnerabilities. I don't know. Red Tornado. I think he's going to be in the Supergirl TV show.
Welcome to the Arena Central. May I take your order, please?
Yeah, I want.
You want Bill Sperm with that?
Right, so I was talking about the idea that Superman is such a simple idea to sell to people, whereas a lot of other characters, you really, if you don't speak English, then somebody has to translate this idea for you into your language. Like, you have to hear their origin story, you have to hear what they're all about. Superman requires very little translation. He is here to help. He's a big, strong man. Bullets bounce off his chest. He can fly. He shoots laser beams out of his eyes. He's from an alien planet. I can tell you all of those things with pictures. I'm sure I could probably tell you most of the Red Tornado's origin in pictures if I knew what the Red Tornado's origin was. He's a robot, so I'm assuming he was built by a dude who builds robots. I could look this up on Google right now and just be like, oh, Red Tornado was created in blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to do that. You can do your own research if you want. This is more of a conceptual podcast than an informative one. I'm not here to educate people. I'm here to open their minds up to new possibilities. Oh, that coffee's getting cold, but it is still tasty. So yeah, I think that's why Superman is such a globally popular character, because he's a very simple character. I've heard other people talk about this in terms of once going back to Scott McCloud. There was something I was watching recently where they were talking about the way ideas are shown to us. And like they were saying, at one end of the spectrum is the Mona Lisa, and at the other end of the spectrum is like a circle with two dots and a line that conveys the idea of a face. Now, the Mona Lisa has all this detail, like you can see a personality, you can see a real human being there. But the circle with two dots and a line, that is something that is universally, well, globally recognizable as a human face. You know, like you don't, and you can see yourself in it. Like, oh, I also have two dots for eyes and a line that is my mouth. Like, that's recognizable. I don't look like the Mona Lisa. Most people don't look like the Mona Lisa. So we can accept that as an image, but we don't see ourselves in that image. I think with Superman, there is a little, obviously he has a physical depiction, so we can't just look at Superman and be like, oh, I'm Superman. But at the same time, the idea of Superman is so easy that it's easy to project yourself into an understanding of what he's all about. The simpler an idea is, the easier it is to transfer around. It's really easy for me to transfer the idea circle to someone. I can just say the word circle, and they know what a circle is. I could draw a circle and pass that page to them. They know what a circle is. It is much more difficult for me to explain why civil war broke out in Bosnia. I would need a handful of charts and some notes, and we would have to speak the same language, and I'd need a little bit of fucking time. I wouldn't be able to just be like, oh, this guy was a jerk, so war, like, the more complex an idea is. I like complicated ideas. I am all for complicated ideas. I live in a world populated by complicated ideas created by complicated people. So I like my fiction to represent that. But I entirely understand that a simpler idea, here's this word again, marketable. A simpler idea is more marketable. You can get more cash out of it. If I sell you a complicated idea, maybe 3 or 4 people are going to want that. But a simple idea, man, hundreds of people might like that. I'm thinking about movies now. Yeah. You know, speaking of movies, just gonna completely sidetrack myself. Written on that same piece of paper, Ghost Rider 2. I haven't seen Ghost Rider 2. I watched a little bit of Ghost Rider 1, and it was just terrible. It was so bad. It was inexcusably bad. It breaks my heart that Ghost Rider movies aren't better. I'm interested in watching the new one because I know it's by the dudes who did Crank, the movie where Jason Statham needs constant adrenaline or electricity or he'll die. And those were like just fun, stupid action movies, and I'm all for that. But Ghost Rider should be cool. I think Ghost Rider's cool. I don't know. Like, maybe you don't know who Ghost Rider is. Of course you know who Ghost Rider is. You're listening to me. Here's a dude. He wears a black leather jacket. He rides a motorbike. Oh, and his head is a skull which is on fire. Right it there. Like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, if you just had a dude riding around on a motorbike with his head on fire, that's fucking badass. Like, what else have you got? Batman's a guy who dresses up as a bat. Moon Knight's a guy who dresses up as a moon? I don't even know how that works. Like, okay, Daredevil, Luke Cage, like, all the characters I like. All the characters I like are pretty cool. They're pretty badass. But are they as badass as a stunt motorbike rider who wears a black leather jacket, rides a motorbike? Of course he rides a motorbike. How many times can I say that in a single sentence? Whose head is a skull that's on fire. That's incredibly badass. Maybe I'm making myself sound like a 12-year-old kid here, but I'm just saying, the concept of a dude whose head is a skull that's on fire, that's really cool. That's a lot cooler than Captain America is a soldier who throws a shield. Like, if I had a choice of, like, oh, who's going to be leading your team of Avengers? You can either have Captain America or Ghost Rider. It's fucking Ghost Rider every time. You know why? Because Ghost Rider's head is on fire. He looks like a badass. So maybe I'll get around to watching Ghost Rider 2. I don't know. I'm sort of intrigued by it. Maybe I'll just watch the Everything Wrong with Ghost Rider another 5,000 times, because I love the Everything Wrong with videos posted by CinemaSins on YouTube. Those things are like the core of my existence, to nitpick and fret over little tiny moments inside of shitty movies. That's where it's at, man. That's where it gets done. Yeah.
You know, kid, usually when somebody pulls shit like that, my first reaction is, I want to punch his fucking lights out. But you know something? You're all right!
Well, that's an awful lot of talking from me, so I think maybe I'll just leave it there. That's maybe all I have to say right now. Actually, I probably have a lot more to say, but I think now is a good time for me to shut up for a little while. So I'm going to leave you with this little track I recorded not too long ago. It's called Fire Your Phaser Skyward.